like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it? 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 1999, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1999, lost in a hotel lobby here in 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny Neibart.
And I'm Phyllis Gove.
And with us again is the great Jarett Wieselman. Thank you for coming back, Jarett. It's been way too long.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me back, especially to talk about Michelle Pfeiffer. Whatever the film is, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's right. Good, because this is our second Michelle movie of the year. This is the better of the two.
Third.
Midsummer
Night's Dream.
Midsummer. So this is you're right. This is the second Michelle vehicle.
Correct.
That we've done. This is the second best of three that we've done.
Yes.
When you guys chose 1999, were you intentionally doing it to choose the three worst Michelle Pfeiffer films released in a single year possible, or what?
Yes, that was one of the reasons we decided to do this podcast,
Yes.
just
Phil
to highlight
hates Michelle and just wanted to talk about how bad she is. So,
you're going to give young people the wrong impression of my favorite actress, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, but I will say this: one of the joys of doing the '89 Patreon was getting to talk for 3 hours about Fabulous Baker Boys. So it all kind of works out, it balances out a little bit.
That was fabulous.
Good. Well, that's good.
Yes.
That was fabulous. Yeah. This is your third. I mean, you've come on to talk about Sex and the City with me on the side, but this is your third film. We've done Drop Dead Gorgeous, The Haunting, and Deep End of the Ocean.
It feels like we're going down in quality in terms of films. I really hope the next time, if you ask me back,
that's going to be great. It's great.
I think this is much better than The Haunting.
I mean, it's a different kind of haunting. So, you know.
It is a different kind of haunting. It is.
Am I going to this is weird. I'm going to defend this
I feel like you're going to defend this movie a little bit.
What's happening?
I'll say this, because we were texting, Kenny and I were texting a little bit, and I was sort of sussing out that Kenny didn't hate this movie. Hate's a very strong word. I think that this movie's issue ultimately really is the direction. I don't actually think the script is that bad, and I don't think that the actors in the movie are bad by any means. It's the direction that's wonky.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think of all of those things, the direction is very movie of the week, which makes it feel lighter than it is, right? Like the colors, the setting. It's just, but I also do wonder, like, how do you do a film about this that doesn't feel that way, right? About a family living in suburbia who has a child disappear in the early in the mid 90s. It's tough. It's a tough needle to thread. But I will also say the script, especially in the beginning, is not great. Like
it's not great.
I mean, Treat Williams within 2 minutes of this movie starting is saying, like, you lose your head if it wasn't attached. Like, what is this writing?
I agree with that. I think it's very flat. Like, even in moments of real, like, tension, like, Kenny, I was thinking about you as the movie opened, because I can only imagine that as a parent, the only parent on this podcast right now,
that we know of.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but that's like, we're talking worst nightmare scenario. Like, there's nothing more horrific, and yet I feel like to sort of dive into it, the sequence or the scene when she loses her child is not as scary or tense or as sort of awful as I imagined it could be.
I guess this is where I start defending the movie.
Great.
This is so. I've never really lost a kid. The closest I've come, the really qualifier, because if you ask my kids, I should bring one of them in here. They'll claim that I lost my son when he was about 4 or 5 at a community theater presentation of The Little Mermaid in Simi Valley. And during intermission, we went to go get snacks, and obviously it's full. Who doesn't want to go see Little Mermaid at Simi Valley?
Sure.
And for like less than 1 second, I lost my child. Like I lost him in a group of people. I went to get snacks with both children, returned with one child, and then my wife is like, "Where is Rollins?" And I'm like, I mean, obviously he's here, but like, yes, I'll go get him. And I go find him, and he's like crying.
Sure.
So like, here's the thing.
Obviously he's here is an amazing response.
You start with, I'm like, give me a fucking break. Like, of course he's here. She's like, no, not until you show him to me. So here's the thing. You don't start with panic. You start the way she started. You start with like, obviously he couldn't have gone far. Right. And even then you're like, all right, so like maybe, these kids aren't morons who just like fall down, manholes. You're like, maybe he went on the elevator. Maybe he got excited and saw someone he thought was like interesting and followed them. But like, they are like kids. The idea that like the worst case scenario thing I think you're alluding to, maybe kidnapping, but that really doesn't like come into your mind. Like, it's like, is he gonna walk outside and get hit by a car? My kids wouldn't. Like, I guarantee you that my kids are looking for me, right? If I lose my kid, like they're looking for me and I'm looking for them. Yeah. And maybe, there are other kids who wandered off. So that's what I actually liked about it, was right away, like there's that initial, like, I'm sure he's somewhere. Then like, it's weird that he's not. Then like, all right, I guess I got to tell someone, but what they play really well is the utter humiliation you feel at that point.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It is not panic yet. It is like, everyone is going to know I am a bad parent. So then she tells her friend, and then they announce it, and then like it's over. And I think, again, like you guys both said the performance was good. I agree, because I think Michelle Pfeiffer plays really well. Like those competing urges within you, which is like, I fucked up, which is very hard to deal with. And then also like, I have to get over that very fast because we have a crisis. And what I'm trying to get is like, from the outside, it's so easy to be like, yeah, get over it. Your kid's missing. Yeah. But like, it's not that easy to like get over that feeling of like, this is my fault, and like this is humiliating.
I don't doubt that, and I do agree with you that Michelle Pfeiffer does a good job at that. There's a lot of good stuff here. I don't mean to suggest that this movie isn't dealing with some interesting ideas. I never read the book, so just to be above board, I don't know the book. I read into the book to find out how it differs, because it is different from the movie. The ending of the book is a lot more ambiguous. There isn't the sort of reunion-esque kind of component that wraps up the film. That was how the film was originally shot. It was shown to test audiences. It did not test well. They decided to do a significant amount of reshoots, which, to the film's credit, I would say I didn't feel. Like, we've all seen movies where there's a lot of reshoots and you feel the reshoots. You feel like the movie is kind of shifting sands and weird. This movie didn't feel that way, so that's a testament to the fact that I guess they did a good job.
Or the entire movie is uneven no matter what, and it kind of can't tell really where those things
also
are
possible. There's a lot of stuff that I imagine, and we've talked a lot, Kenny, about adaptations. There have been a lot of them in 99 and in 89 as well, but it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. The translation of what people saw in their head, lots of hit books that people imagined a whole movie in their minds, and the movie is not an effective realization of that. I don't know, maybe this book, that the tonal shifts that seemed crazy to me might have worked in the book.
I would agree with you. And I would also think the other thing, there's some books like procedurals where it's a little more straightforward. I think a book like this, I would imagine, I'm not a reader, but I would imagine there's a lot of internal monologuing. Yes. There's a lot of, self-description. And I think describing emotions is really meaty to do, but I think like experiencing them in a scene sometimes feels less pleasurable, right? When you read a character and their thought process and they're going through all the things, like even Bethy, which I always had a really hard time with that. Everyone in the movie calls her Bethy. That seems really weird to me. Her name is
Bethy's. I've never heard anyone called Bethy in my life.
Never in my life. But it's like,
they do it in Mayor of Easttown. One of the characters is named Bethy, and it makes me want to jump off a roof too. I'm with you guys. It's an absurd name.
It's crazy because her name is Beth. And so if it was just Treat's character and this was like their cute nickname, that would be one thing. But like everyone in the movie calls her Bethy as if she's some child who needs, taking care of, which might have been the intention, but it did not play.
Bethy is a more ridiculous name than Treat.
Yes, I would agree.
That's how dumb it is.
I would agree. I mean,
I love Treat. I don't love him in this movie, to be honest, but I love
Treat. He doesn't really have much to do in this movie. But I'll just say that I do think so. Michelle Pfeiffer apparently read this book, chased after this book, wanted to adapt this. She didn't produce the film, I don't believe, but this was very much a thing that she read and she wanted to do. And I think that speaks to what you're saying, Jarett, of like, if I read this, if I was Michelle Pfeiffer and read it, I'd feel like I was inside the head of this character. I'd feel like this is something I know I can do. But then the translation of that from page to screen, it really comes down to like the plotting for me. There's like moments where significant crazy things happen that are sort of dumped either in info dumps or just the movie's just really twisty and turny in odd ways that feel at odds with the tone of the movie. I don't know.
I would agree. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because, as a Michelle Pfeiffer psychopath, she's really only produced one film in her entire career. One Fine Day was the only one she was a credited executive producer on. She has a uncredited producer credit on 1,000 Acres, which let's never watch that movie. But One Fine Day was really the only one she dug her teeth into. And she said in interviews that she doesn't enjoy the process of producing. Right. She's like there to do a job. She loves acting. She loves finding material, but she has no desire to turn that material into the project, which I think is really interesting.
I want to talk. Sorry, go ahead, Kenny.
I just want to kind of point out or just quickly discuss that there are stories that make really, it's not that they make really good novels. They're naturally novels, right? And this is the kind of story that is a natural Oprah's Club, beach read, pass among your friends type book that seems like the kind of thing that will make a good movie. You cast these kind of things in your head as you're doing it because it's very compelling on the page. But it's so hard, particularly in our cynical society, to make something this overly sincere without it feeling like super sappy. I guess what I brought to this film was like, that's so baked in. We've seen a bunch of movies like that from this year. We've all seen a bunch of movies like this from our lives. I mean, I remember in the mid 90s thinking Losing Isaiah was like a very good movie. And looking back, it's like a very bad movie. But like that kind of stuff was very, it's all of that is part of like, I expect the saccharine going into this film and just ignore it. I don't really think I think that's almost one of those I don't want to say like problematic because I feel like I'm conflating the term, but it's akin to a relic from a different time that you just have to ignore. Like the pacing, the direction, the overall, like Jarett said, the overall movie of the week feel, which used to be an acceptable like veneer on a film, on a feature film, and just isn't anymore. Right?
No, I agree with that. I think that, watching this, I was really hit with a bunch of things. The first that I think is worth unpacking in a second is just the Michelle Pfeiffer of it all. And I want to kind of look at why this film doesn't really exist. You know what I mean? Like she's got a couple movies like that in her filmography.
Sure does.
She has a lot.
She has a fair amount of them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the ones that do exist very loudly.
Yes.
But I think that, to your point, Kenny, it was a sign of the times to a certain degree as well, where movies like this could get made and could be as beige is. Like, this is the most beige movie. I feel like Story of Us is similarly like that too, where it's just like there's nothing about this world that I would want to live in or find particularly interesting. But
you know what's interesting about that, Phil, and I do want to sort of, obviously talk more about Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
But it's almost one of those things, and I don't know if this is going to make a ton of sense, but if you're going to tell this story, if you're going to do this story, it's actually the kind of story you want to spend a lot of time with. For example, when you're reading a book, that's a lot of time. So you really get to get into the minutia of it. You spend time in these years. You feel the passage of time. You feel her sorrow. Then you see the small growth, right? You almost move too fast in the film through the emotional experience. Like, if this were a mini series, I would be more interested, because it's like, okay, first episode, you actually spend a ton of time with the family, and kid vanishes at the end of the first episode. Then it's from there. With this, he's gone 9 minutes into the movie. And so you're just immediately thrown into this crazy state, and you're just having these histrionics and these emotional upheavals. And it's like, it can never go deep enough, because it has to keep hitting that 1 hour and 45 minute running time. So you're kind of just dancing on the surface of everything that could be so much more interesting if you really dug into it over the course of a miniseries or a book, as this originally was.
And that's an interesting kind of, that's an interesting sign of those times, that if you had a prestige bit of property, you didn't have the option to do anything else.
Right.
If you wanted to do it in a way that was going to bring you money and prestige, which is what all these people want anyway, right? Now I think things get made into miniseries that absolutely should not be made into miniseries,
Sure.
Yeah. But, Big Little Lies kind of made it, this is now what the thing that you do. If you have a book, turn it into an 8-hour thing, and maybe get a second season. And I agree.
I do think that. Yes, sir. I was just going to say, earlier today we did an episode on The End of the Affair. I don't know if you've seen that film.
Oh, sure.
Jarett.
Love that movie.
It's a very good movie. The reason I bring it up is it's an adaptation of a book, but also it's not linear. Part of, I think, what hurts this movie is how straight a line it is. Like, there is, considering the passage of time, although you wouldn't know it from Michelle or Treat, who don't age a day, even though there's almost a 10-year gap in the middle of it. They actually did in real
life, though.
I was going to say, has Michelle aged in 10 years, that 10-year period to be
fair point.
Come on.
But I feel like...
Neither to Treat Williams. They very intelligently cast people who don't age.
This is true. This is true. I think had they jumped around more in time, to your point, Jarett, I think what they could have done is hit harder on how these people have changed over the years. But instead, the straight line of it, I think, unfortunately, makes the film that much sort of flat.
What's like a good analogy in some ways would actually be White Oleander with Michelle Pfeiffer, which she made a couple of years after this. Not that they jump around in time as much, but you see, it's like there's chapters, right, in the film. The daughter is with this parent, and then she's with this parent, and you get these periods where she goes and visits her mother, and you see the difference in her daughter over that time, her look, the way she acts, the way she, handles her mother. And I think that's kind of the thing, to your point, that's missing, is seeing the different colors and levels of that emotional journey, where here it's kind of like, I'm in constant crisis. There's actually a really good line about right at the halfway mark, or whenever they jump to 1999 and they're in Treat Williams' new restaurant, and Whoopi Goldberg is there for God knows what reason, because they're really still good friends with the detective from their case a decade and a half later.
Failed.
Well, I mean, who failed, But she turns to Bethy. Oh, by the way, Candy Bliss. That's clearly a name that's kept over from the book. I mean, that's such a book name. Like,
crazy.
That's like,
I know it's a stripper name.
Yeah, it's like that's such a book experience. But totally. Candy turns to Bethy and says, "You're doing a really good imitation of having a life." And I thought that was such an interesting, great line that obviously, again, came from the book, because we know the screenwriters weren't working with much. But like that to me, like, let's explore that, right? Like, let's unpack that. Like, that single line was so much more interesting than anything else that happened within 20 minutes of it, because you actually see someone analyzing what this person is going through, and that facade that they're so confident in, being so transparent to those around them, I think is really interesting. And the movie never goes there.
It never goes there, really. And it's it is interesting to think about, like, the things they're interested in talking about are the marriage, which I think is interesting, and they do go to some interesting places within that. I would say that the depiction of marriage in this film is better than the depiction of marriage in The Story of Us, which is a low bar, but that's something. But I just feel like, again, just sort of passage of time and a marriage on the rocks. It does feel as though she made 2 films about that in the same year, which is interesting. And I also just think that they're interested in talking about nature versus nurture, the idea of, like, what is a child that is yours, versus adopted, or in this case, oddly kidnapped from down the street. So I mean, we'll get to that, but
I keep thinking of, I keep thinking of how much better this would be as a mini series.
Yes.
And the reasons why, and it's not just of course, all the reasons you guys are saying it, of course, the ability to drill down on certain moments of their life and, really get into what this means to the 2 kids, and they really kind of, yada, yada, yada over the Vincent of it all. But that I think where he wound up made a lot of sense, of course, right? Yeah. But for beyond that stuff, the tonal thing, it wouldn't have had to change much tonally to make a mini series that people would have been comfortable with. The thing that I'm thinking is, I think there are shows like this, but they always seem to have a supernatural element, right? Where some kid is gone and then comes back. And I wonder if you could really, or a serious crime element, like a Mayor of Easttown reminds me of this a bit. Sure. I wonder if you can do something this kind of quiet, because it would be kind of lovely. It would be a kind of good exploration of loss and grief and shame and all those things.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing. I mean, I don't know if you're watching or had watched the last In Treatment. Like, that is very, in a lot of ways, this idea of just people talking and really working through their trauma and their experiences, and, the analysis of that, I think could be really interesting if done well. I mean, I think now that we're talking about this as a miniseries still, the idea of, imagine the episode when, Bethy discovers that the kid is living next door, and they're running there and they go to the house, and that episode ends. And then the entire next episode is from Cecile and George's perspective, right? Like, you see that life that they had together with their son, and it felt very normal. Like, there's all of these interesting things that you could unpack in a different world. And I just think, but to your point earlier, Kenny, like, that's just not what this is. And we need to stop making it like, try to be the thing we wish it was.
Well, I just, yes, of course. But I keep thinking about this.
Yeah, it would be cool.
Why I graded.
Yeah, you can write it, Kenny.
Yes, of course. I've already thought. Yes, of course.
I'm sure the options lapse at this point.
I think the option is open.
You know what? We're literally, Phil and I are in the process of writing something for David E. Kelly. So we'll just put this on.
Oh, perfect. Great.
We'll just throw by that, I mean, we are presenting something to him. We're not getting paid for anything yet. But we'll just throw this on at the end. Be like, hey, send this over
also,
to your wife.
maybe this. Yeah.
Roll over and
release this after you pitch him, just in case he's a fan of the pod.
I keep grading this film on a curve because I feel like they did the best with what they were. Not the best, right? Not the best, but really a good job with what they were given. And it might also be the kind of thing where any director of any renown looked at this and said, I don't want to do this story. This is not like for me. So
but they also picked someone who the filmmaker Yulu Grossbard, who I don't particularly know his work, but he did a film prior to this called Georgia with Jennifer Jason Leigh and Mare Winningham.
Oh, Mare Winningham was nominated. Mare Winningham was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for that. That's like a well reviewed.
It's a good movie. I like that film. I have not seen Falling in Love, True Confessions, or Straight Time, but he did have these are big casts. These are big movies, studio movies. So like it wasn't like they just went to nobody. But I'll also say that from what I remember of Georgia, having seen it back in like 95 or whatever, I haven't seen it recently, but like that movie actually really did capture the tension between two sisters and sort of that the push and pull of two very different sisters. You know, the scene that glaringly jumps out at me in this film is, do you remember the Christmas scene, the family scene?
Yes. Yeah.
That scene's rough. Because it feels stilted as hell. Everyone's delivery is really weird. It all just and this is just, this is just directing 101, right? Covered particularly well. The coverage is odd. It's stuff like that jumped out at me as this just might not be the right project for this director.
Well, what's interesting, and I'm now looking at his resume, this director is predominantly a theater director, which actually does make sense. You've just got a lot of shots that are just kind of locked where they are. We're not doing a lot of movement. So I could see him kind of thinking, this is like a play. We're going to do this like a play. Right. And I don't know that it's successful as a play either, but I do think it makes a little more sense now that you pointed that out.
Totally.
It would be a good play. Actually.
Yes.
Because it would be a great, the problem with this is the use of exteriors, is the building out of this world a little bit, is you do start to feel like, why are we staying this tight in a world where there's a missing child out there? It does feel like we should be seeing the volunteers looking through the brush and all those things that you get in missing children movies. But if you shot this actually like a play with one location, and had a few had a few acts, I think that'd be really interesting.
I totally agree.
Think about it. We don't even leave the lobby when the kid goes missing, right? We stay in the lobby the entire time. Like, show us a hallway, show us a basement. Like, we know we're looking for them, right? Like, create a sense of grandeur, because it's sort of like, I just think this kid is like in a corner somewhere because all I know of this building is this one room you showed me.
This movie also, this movie's got almost a $40 million budget, right? Like, that's not nothing in 1999. That's close to $80 million today. They could have done something with that, right? Like, they could have really created, that particular scene that we talked about earlier where her son goes missing goes from kind of 0 to 60, which is that you see her, and that might very well, Kenny, to your description, might very well be the way that it would go down. I don't know she gets pinned to the ground and sedated by EMTs.
Okay, can we talk about, is that legal? Like, can you just do that?
I certainly wonder.
This is not some like crazy raving woman. This is a mother who lost her child, and like these medics are sedating her without any questioning of her medical history or like
at all.
Like, it was the weirdest thing.
It was really weird.
don't know. If that's all it takes to get sedated, I'm gonna hit my local hotel.
You're hopping down to the fucking Howard Johnson.
I'll be in the hotel lobby freaking out. But someone runs at me with something.
But I think that we could have seen, even I would have bought the sedation perhaps if there was a build up to it in terms of us seeing sort of the ratcheted up, searching and the whatever. But instead it was just like all of a sudden she starts screaming and crying and then they just knock her out. It's just like, whoa.
I guess this movie does stink. I'm wrong.
I'm going to read a synopsis real quick for the people that haven't watched this. After Beth Capodoras, played by Michelle Pfeiffer's youngest son, Ben, vanished in Chicago, she slowly descends into a deep depression, affecting her husband, Pat, played by Treat Williams, and her other children. Relocating to Chicago several years later, they are shocked to discover a local boy named Sam, who looks strikingly similar to Ben, along with Detective Candy Bliss, played by Whoopi Goldberg. The family must relive their trauma and find out the truth about Sam. The Deep End of the Ocean opened on March 12th, 1999, in sixth place against Analyze This, Cruel Intentions, The Rage Carry 2, The Corruptor, and Wing Commander, the real murderer's row of films that week.
Done almost every one of those.
Oh, man.
We have done almost every one of those.
Rage Carry 2 is so good. Sorry, that's beside the point.
We did
it. I liked it too.
It's kind of good.
It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's not, I know that's not what I'm going to talk about.
No, it's all good. It would go on to make $28 million on a $38 million budget. It has 43% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, 53% from audiences. Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, saying the deep end of the ocean is a painfully stolted movie that lumbers past emotional issues like a wrestler in a cafeteria line, putting a little of everything on its plate. It provides big roles for Michelle Pfeiffer and Treat Williams, but doesn't provide them with the screenplay support they need. The result is that awkwardness when characters express emotions that the audience doesn't share. That might be a little bit harsh, but I want to talk about Michelle Pfeiffer.
Here we go.
Here we go. In 1999, as we mentioned, we have covered almost all of her films. This actually is this is the last film of hers from 99. Deep in the Ocean, Midsummer Night's Dream, Story of Us. She then does What Lies Beneath in 2000, which is obviously a big hit. She does I Am Sam in 2001, White Oleander 2002. Then she kind of like goes away for about 4 years or so. She does Hairspray, Stardust, Sherry, Dark Shadows, People Like Us. I mean, I think that there are two performances of hers over the last few years that I think really stand out. The first is Mother. Yes. I think she's great in Mother.
So good.
And I think she's great in The Wizard of Lies as Ruth Madoff. And I absolutely adored French Exit, as anyone who follows me on Twitter will know. But I kind of want to talk about this moment in her career where it does feel like she's huge in the 80s and early 90s. And then as an aficionado of Michelle Pfeiffer, do you think that it's the roles like that she's choosing, the stuff that's coming towards her, or do you think it's just sort of maybe perhaps a little of her age-wise falling into some sort of a purgatory?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, if you think about it like this, you know, she's now in her mid 40s, something like that. And think about the movies that are getting made in the early 2000s, right? There's not a lot of this sort of demographic being catered to. It's a ton of teen movies. Like that's the primary thrust. It's a ton of action movies. It's a ton of like male fronted ransom kind of films. Sure. And I don't really know what space, you know, like the leading women of the time occupied. If you look back, you know, Jodie Foster at the time or Jessica Lange at the time, like they're really not part of the conversation. You have Julia Roberts still doing rom-coms. You know, you had My Best Friend's Wedding coming out in 99, right?
97. We had Notting Hill and
yes, thank
Runaway
you. So
Bride,
she's still on that trajectory, which was never Michelle Pfeiffer's strong suit, even though who wouldn't fall in love with Michelle Pfeiffer? The other thing that comes into play, and this is where I'm going to get a little crazy, is this is when she's like at peak having both of her children, right? She gave birth, she was pregnant with her son filming Dangerous Minds, and then went right into all of these other things. And then she adopted her daughter and then got pregnant when she met David E. Kelley. And so we're now talking about having 5 and 6 year olds at the time of this pause. And so basically what she had said was, I just wanted to raise my kids. They moved to their farm, I think in Montana. I want to say as much of this as I know without sounding like a stalker. But, you know, this is like sort of that point in her life when she did choose family over career. And but I do think there was also a lack of opportunity that allowed her to make that choice.
Yeah, it's I just recently did an episode on Premiere Magazine where myself and two guests covered every single issue of 1999, and one of them is the Women in Hollywood issue, and she is on the cover, and there's a pretty lengthy article with her in there where she's talking about how, you know, I'm turning a new leaf. I've got What Lies Beneath coming out, and I Am Sam and White Oleander. Like those are big movies. Yeah. You know, White Oleander and I Am Sam are kind of Oscar plays depending on how you look at it.
Yeah. For sure. I Am Sam got like 2 or 3, I think. Right.
Yes. I would say this is 2.
Yes.
I think she thought it would have been. I think she thought it was going to be.
Could have been. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Same with Story of Us, maybe. Like in a better world.
I agree with that too. I agree with that.
I mean, listen, if you see Rob Reiner writing a story about a marriage falling apart, you're like, this is gold.
Yeah. How can this not work? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, it wasn't that she didn't care about her career, but to your point, her family was obviously paramount to her, and she was sort of juggling these two things. I also just wonder as well about, like, it's pretty clear that she kind of wants to make character-based things, right? Like she wants the meaty characters to sink her teeth into. And to your point, there's not a lot of them for women in their early to mid 40s.
She's one of those actors who I believe is a character actor trapped in the body of the leading lady, right? She's so good when, I mean, truly, like if you think about it, like her best work, her weirdest work, you know, you've got Catwoman, you've got Suki Richmond in Witches of Eastwick, you've got Married to the Mob. Like Angela DeMarco to me is like such a character performance. Like the things that really stand out, you know, are these like really interesting, weird, offbeat people. White Oleander, Ingrid in that is such an example of such an odd choice for her. I mean, she's ostensibly this just monster, but like she's relishing it. And so I think it's probably a little bit difficult when you look like Michelle looks, but maybe your tastes skew a little left of center. But you do, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. She's made all of the movie star choices too, right? Like she's not sitting here. It's like not like Michelle Pfeiffer and Margot Martindale fighting over roles. But I think that, you know, I think that like she does have that inclination a little bit.
I also think like this was around the time when you started to hear a lot of Hollywood doesn't know, and you guys said it too, Hollywood doesn't know what to do with women over 40. As a person who is right around 40 and married to a person over 40, that seems incredibly weird to me now. Additionally, you look at the film landscape, and 40-year-olds are, 40-year-old actresses are essentially playing people starting their careers out. The point I want to make about Michelle Pfeiffer is Michelle Pfeiffer is playing moms in this, and she's playing a mom in Story of Us and mom in White Oleander. She never physically aged into that. Like it really is a weird thing. Like there's a cognitive dissonance for Hollywood, which was you've been around for like 15 years and you should be playing moms now, but you also look like this. What do we do? What do we do? Right? These days, like you straight up, you can still, I understand Marissa Tomei is playing moms. Marissa Tomei is playing like bombshells still, right? You can straight up have women in their mid 50s who are playing bombshells because we've advanced a little bit more to understand people come in different shapes and sizes. But so I think she weirdly, more than maybe any other actor I can think of, fell victim to this like women 40 plus have to look a certain way or else we just don't know how to do with it. And ooh, gross, the idea of someone over 40, a woman over 40 having sex, like ooh, gross. So unless it's like an old people movie.
Well, it's like that line from First Wives Club when Goldie Hawn's like, there's 3 ages for women in Hollywood: babe, district attorney, and driving Miss Daisy. Right. Like, and that's exactly what it is. It's like, that's all they know how to do with you. And this, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, we're talking 99. So if we're at the beginning of this Hollywood not knowing what to do with women, I think it was like 2004 when Glenn Close did The Shield, which was revolutionary at the time because movie stars did not do television. And then she did Damages, and she changed the entire tenor of the industry when they realized like, oh, there's all this opportunity in this other medium that is just as good. And I think this was kind of the beginning of those dominoes falling in terms of people cluing into the fact of that they just don't know what to do with us.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing What Lies Beneath in the theater. And there's like, I think there's like one scene of them in bed together and they're like kissing before they have sex. And you could feel in the audience that people were like, this is gross. Like, why are they like, they're old. Like it's, and by the way, they're not. And also they're both gorgeous people. So like, what are we talking about here?
That movie?
I don't know if that's how people felt. Like maybe in your
I'm not
audience,
saying that I'm just saying that in that audience, there was. But my point is that back then, I think that there was that. I think that you watch that now, and you're like, "These are two."
My point is the opposite of that. My point is that it's not gross, and Hollywood just didn't get it. Like that's like.
I'm saying that in 2000, when I was sitting in a theater in 2000, I believe that you think. I did not feel that they were gross. I'm just saying that the people that I was with and the people in that theater. But I know what you're saying, Kenny.
No, I think that I think it's sexy, but I think we also, in 1999, Jennifer Coolidge was what, in her fucking early 40s or whatever, and she's playing old Stifler's mom. So it was like it was like a joke sex character. Yeah, so people were certainly conditioned to think of any woman over 40 as like, if they're going to have sex, it's a big joke. But I always thought Michelle Pfeiffer was an exception to that rule.
I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer is the exception. But I also think, too, and you kind of tapped on this, both of you have been talking about this a little bit, which is she's almost too beautiful for her own good on some level.
She's too beautiful to live.
I mean,
she's just
truly,
like,
But that's always the thing. It's like, it's like, do you believe her as like a ranch hand in 1,000 acres? Do you believe her as a public school teacher in Dangerous Minds? Like, there are these elements of, do you believe her as like the dowdy secretary who gets thrown out a window? It's like, or
the waitress in Frankie and Johnny.
I believed her as that. I believed her as Selena Kyle, the nerd. But.
I mean, I believe her as all of those things. But what I'm saying is, like, I think when we're watching a movie, we kind of are already checking that reality at the door. Sure. I mean, like, people just don't look like this. And if they do look like this, they make movies playing us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Do you want to know how old Jennifer Coolidge was when she made American Pie?
I mean,
it's like 34. I want to kill myself.
She was 38. I want to kill everybody. That's how I feel.
That's a nightmare.
I want to kill the world. That a 38-year-old was like some old, pardon the language, MILF. Like, come on.
That's a nightmare.
Jennifer Coolidge, by the way, absolutely murdering it on White Lotus right now. That scene where she closes the door on the guy and then kind of opens it again. That little character work is genius. But going back to what we're saying, tie this all sort of together, American Pie 99, these movies 99. This is also the height of TRL and like the teen Britney, Christina, like the skinniest, the youngest, like, this is what is popular right now. And so I think the idea that if the energy in the industry and in culture is with young, hot girls, a 38-year-old Jennifer Coolidge does look 52 in a film. Michelle Pfeiffer, like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't know what to do with these actresses who don't look like that and shouldn't look like that. And so I think it all kind of plays into like the sexist, disgusting Hollywood of that time, of now, up until, who knows? But I think it's just that entirely misogynistic culture that all of these things kind of coexisted in that led to all of these decisions being made. I agree. I also wonder too, just sort of thinking in my head about kind of the decades leading up to this one, and would this film have been better, and I put that in quotation marks, but more suited for an earlier decade? There's a 70s or 80s version of this movie that I think is a lot more interesting. And I think that it just, to sort of what we're talking about, it doesn't really fit in the late 90s in this way. And if it was made today, as we said, it would probably be a miniseries on HBO or something like that.
You're right. This is not the Fish nor Fowl in 1999, right? Like, we were beyond this type of filmmaking as a culture, and we had not yet gotten to the place where we can, where people were secure enough to go to television and do this over 8 episodes, right? So I think the 1980, like, this reminds me a little bit of Ordinary People. Like the 1981 version of this.
Yes.
That's exactly the same. With a grainier film stock and worse sound quality, might have just
and more interesting
felt better. Or just time appropriate costumes might have felt right.
Yep. It does feel very. That's a really good comp. I think Ordinary People is one of those things that that hit a vein, obviously, in its time. I
think Ordinary People is an excellent movie, and I also think that if anybody watched it today, you have to take it with a giant grain of salt that it was made 40 years ago.
For sure. For sure. I want to talk about the Capadoras for a second here. Do they seem like a particularly Italian family to you? Do Did that read as Italian to you?
I love real names like that, though. That's a good name.
It is a good name. And the restaurant looks straight out of like, I don't even know what. I mean, like, is that like a Maggiano's?
It's like every mall. It's like, it's barely a macaroni grill, if we're being honest. Like, it's tough.
It's something. It's something.
I just like that he has a dance floor. Like, that he thinks that's going to be the draw. All these people are still looking to dance on Saturday nights.
Yeah.
But I really did appreciate that even though he was stolen, he still learned an Italian routine from his stolen parents. just not the right Italian routine to do his impromptu at his welcome home ceremony. It was very weird.
I know.
It was very strange. I will say this about the Capadoras. Jonathan Jackson, who plays older
Vincent,
thank you. Everything he's in is phenomenal. Like, I mean, I know he's not in a ton, but like, I was a General Hospital person growing up. He was lucky. He was amazing. He was on National. He was amazing. He feels like an actor who got a little bit screwed by his generation because he didn't fit in with the idea of what like that, I don't know, like that 17, 18 like year old actor was supposed to be.
Yeah, the WB actor.
Good parent. Yeah, exactly.
But he's a good looking kid.
He is a good looking kid.
Totally.
And you know what else I liked? He could play basketball.
Both of them could kind of.
Totally. Like Ben could play like a 12-year-old who is just so annoying that he can actually hit outside shots. And Vincent clearly could play, but not that matters. But it mattered a lot to me.
But it makes that scene work though, because I'm sure you're like me, Kenny.
Movie. Yes.
When they can't play and they're just cutting to ways to make it look like they can play. They look like they can play.
It drives me nuts. You would never cast someone to be a singer who can't sing. So, like, just get someone who can play the sport.
Oh, well, I will say my version of that, it's obviously not sports related, but when you see people in movies who are pretending to smoke, it's the most annoying thing in the world. You only notice this, where you just like see them and they like, first of all, they're holding it like they've never held something in their hand before, like a 1920s cigarette. And they're just like, and then you see them never inhale, actually inhale. And then they're like, God, I mean, pack a day. What can I tell you? And it's like, you've never inhaled a cigarette in your entire life.
You'd think I was a crazy person, right? So first of all, when I used to smoke, because I didn't smoke a lot, when I used to smoke, I picked up my smoking from this like kid that I thought was very cool when I was 16 and he was 17.
We all did.
And he used to smoke like this. So that's how I always smoked.
I remember that
like
person.
This.
I remember that.
And then, and what that led to is sometimes I drink my water like this.
Why?
And my daughter, I have a messed up mouth. This is how I smile.
I mean, okay. I've never thought of it as messed up, but sure.
My daughter called me on it. My daughter's like, Daddy, this is how you drink.
Of course it was your daughter that called you on it, by the way. Of course it's Layla.
It's like, let me show everyone in the family drinks. Daddy drinks like this.
But it's like,
I do think you're to go back to what you were saying, Jarett, about Jonathan Jackson in this film, who I would actually argue that Vincent kind of gets the short end of the stick in terms of the character. Like, I think that there's more to be mined there.
Yeah.
And again,
which is ironic given the fact even the parents don't give him enough. The film doesn't give him enough either.
It's true.
It's true. But I agree with you, Phil.
But he also has, I would argue, two of the best scenes in the movie, which are both the jail scenes. The scene he has with Michelle Pfeiffer, and then the scene he has with Ben or Sam or whatever you want to call him at the end.
From Smart House, Phil.
From Smart House.
Much better in this than Smart House.
Right.
Yes. We covered Smart House a couple weeks ago, the Disney movie.
Sure.
He's much better in this than he was in Smart House.
Yes.
Also star Final Destination 3 with Mary Liz Winstead, not the point. Please.
Is he in that one?
The third one, yeah. He's the boy. He's the main guy.
I think he's pretty good in this movie, dude.
I think he is too.
I think Ben Sam is pretty good. Yeah.
I think he is too. I think he plays some really interesting levels. He's got some interesting stuff to do.
And he can
dance
and play basketball.
Yes, he dances in Smart House. He's pretty good.
He does dance in Smart House. Everyone dances in Smart House.
The kid's pretty good. Yeah, the kid's all right.
Okay.
Moving on.
You just take our word for it, Jarett.
I will.
But I do think that that the Beth stuff is interesting, and in terms of how they're sort of circling each other. But there is the scene with the cedar box.
Yes.
Which plays, there's a reveal later, but that scene, they're both less Michelle, more Ryan Merriman. It feels a little like Monica and David from AI. They're both kind of got this energy of just like not understanding how to relate to each other in a way that made me think that Ryan Merriman might have been a good David a few years later. But but I do think that that the Capadoras as a family, I'm not entirely sure I bought them as a family unit.
No, I if you had told me they stole all those children and never had sex, I would have believed that for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
I think
it's true.
I think it's probably difficult from a screenwriting perspective to show you why a family is together when you're joining them at the part of their life where the family is falling apart, right? I think that's a difficult thing for a screenwriter to manage. You have basically that very first scene in the house when she's running around and they're being cute and that's it. And then from there on out, it's fights, it's tension, it's, coldness, both. And then the way they treat poor Vincent as a child, and so it's like the whole movie is about the family. You're not really sure like what's keeping them together. Is it this idea that they've been bonded by tragedy, but also at the same time, there's a really interesting note too that Michelle plays a couple of times that I think is very overt, but also very intelligent, is she pulls away from Vincent as a child before he ever pulls away from her, right? You see that she's like, I know, like I'm mad at my son. And it's done in very subtle ways before it becomes really overt and aggressive. But I don't know how you make a family feel loving or engaged or united or tied together when their entire experience is about fracturing.
That's completely fair, and it does again come back to sort of this adaptation and perhaps an unadaptable book, certainly into a movie. I want to just talk about a couple of the significant plot turns because I think we have to unpack some of them because they make very little sense to me, and I hope that you guys can make sense of them for me.
I doubt it.
So the first one, and the most significant one, of course, is that an old, not friend, but high school peer of Michelle Pfeiffer's goes to this high school reunion, kidnaps Michelle Pfeiffer's child, brings this child home, and raises it as their own. Correct?
Yes.
Husband doesn't wonder where child came from.
Meets later. Doesn't exist. He meets her after she's already stolen the child.
I must have missed that part.
Yes, it's done in a very quick sentence that Detective Candy Bliss does a lot of revealing in. Okay,
because I didn't catch that part. Okay, so that's on me. We then have the kid comes to mow their lawn. Ben comes to mow their lawn. Sam, Ben, whatever. Michelle Pfeiffer proceeds to take a whole bunch of pictures of him from an upstairs window. And the kid's just waving like it's totally normal. Yeah.
I take pictures. That's my job.
I'm taking pictures of leaves. That's money. What I do. It was really weird.
Keep mowing.
Yeah.
It
was so weird.
Cool job, man.
I love those. I want to be a leaf photographer when I grow up too, lady.
Not only that, the leaves in her own backyard.
Yeah, right. It's fantastic.
I mean, but what a cush gig. Could you imagine someone paid you just to take photos of leaves in your own backyard? It's pretty sweet job.
Well, keep going, Phil. Where are you going with this?
So that was she takes pictures of him. It's weird, but it is what it is. The significant thing that I don't understand is they move. So there's a 9-year jump. They move to Chicago.
Right.
But the kid is kidnapped from somewhere else, or is it also within Chicago?
Milwaukee. I believe it was Milwaukee.
Where the hotel was?
Yeah, was
yeah.
Reunion in Milwaukee?
I think. Yeah, I guess you're right. All right, so they're from Madison,
right?
The reunion was in Milwaukee.
I could be fully making that up, but I thought I saw.
No, there's no way you're making that up.
I trust. I
mean,
you.
I could be.
But doesn't it seem like a coincidence that this that the kid just happens to be a couple doors down?
Yes.
It's
insane. It's
it's the worst part of the movie.
Insane.
Okay.
Like
it's a disaster.
Because that must be how it happens in the book, which is also crazy. Yes. Truly, there's no rationale for it. Honestly, it's probably the biggest plot contrivance in the history of cinema. I don't know.
It's the biggest plot contrivance we've seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that people would say, if this happened in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. And guess what? Yeah. It's in a movie and I don't believe it. So,
Agreed.
You can't just put shit in. You can't use the rules of some crazy shit happens in real life in movies. As some very smart screenwriter says, coincidence works for premise and coincidence doesn't work for resolution. All movies are basically started on coincidence. That's fine. That's a premise of a movie, but that is not a buy I am willing to accept. I'm knocking you a few points for this ridiculous resolution.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It feels super lazy. It feels like they just didn't. I mean, but I'm assuming that's a Jacqueline Mitchell choice.
I think so.
But again, is that indicative of the kind of literature that Oprah was recommending at the time? It seems very.
Apparently.
It seems very beneath Oprah.
Meanwhile,
yeah.
I may have, if I were adapting this, just made the decision as soon as I got Whoopi on board, who plays a great cop. I love her as a cop. The player, she's an amazing cop in the player.
She's always great. She's
awesome. She's Whoopi. As soon as I got her on board and I kept her as a character throughout the 9-year jump, all she has to do is say, "We've located Ben." It doesn't have to be this ridiculous fucking shit. They have him fingerprinted. This key could have been arrested for all you fucking know. He could have but it's not that hard. And then it could have been Celine or Celise or whoever or whatever the girl's name is who stole him. But at that point, there's no win here because it's Deus Ex Machina. Candy Bliss at some point is like, "I didn't find him, you found him." She didn't find him. No. The Plymouth Rock landed on them.
Yeah, it's a crazy. First of all, it must have happened in the book, but the idea
with all due respect to Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. I think that's the first time he's been mentioned in the same breath as Deep End of the Ocean.
It's such a good line and it's such a good idea, and it's too bad that I can't really use it, but I'll use it here on podcast.
Yeah, it works on this episode. The kid just showing up to mow the lawn, the mere coincidence of it is completely unnecessary to your point, Kenny. There's any number of ways, and also it makes Candy Bliss look bad at her job. So you could this way make her look good at her job and have her say, "I found your kid."
Exactly.
And it's crazy. But it's such a weird element that they do in the film, which I'm guessing is also in the book, that Vincent recognizes him months, if not years earlier, and says nothing about it.
Makes no sense.
It's that's some real deep-seated anger at a child you lost in the first place, Vincent.
That's some good son shit. At that point, you have to consider dropping him off a cliff.
Seriously.
Can I just say too, though, that part of the problem with the tone of this film, right? And listen, we're watching this film in 2021 through, obviously, we're putting it under a microscope. But still, because of the tone and the way that the film is laid out, it makes these things so much louder, right? These things pop out at you because of the way that the film is structured. There's many movies that Kenny and I have watched over the course of this podcast that have all sorts of crazy buys, but because of the ride and us signing up and being like, you know what, I'm fine with it, I'll turn a blind eye. This, when the fucking kid shows up, you're just like, what?
Here's the thing: this movie is made for dummies. and tells you exactly what it is at all times. It's all exposition. There's absolutely no subtext in this movie.
Right.
Because of that, it's a very, very easy watch, right?
Yes,
so maybe the least challenging watch we've had all year.
For sure.
And I think that's part of why I like it, because I watched this from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. a morning when one of my children wake me up super early. And it was it was exactly what I needed. I didn't look at my phone a lot, but you're totally right, Phil. Like, because everything is so easy to understand, so easy to digest, when things don't make sense, you have that little like,
you're like, wait, what?
This is the movie that's supposed to like put me on a little, moving sidewalk and just take me where I need to go. Like, I don't want to walk. Like, I don't want to.
So I
any work here. I'm probably trying to figure out your failures.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the moment when she's drugged by the EMTs, but I do want to just state two other things that happen in that moment. The first is she pulls out a laughably large photograph of Ben from her purse that is like the size of a fucking like I don't even know what. It's gigantic.
She did some modeling for JCPenney. Here,
it's gigantic. She sees it. She starts to cry. She then bites Pat's hand to the point of it bleeding, and then she gets fucking drugged. It's a crazy moment.
But again, in a book, that would all probably feel very normal, right? Because you'd be like, and like the biting even makes sense in the context of like words, but like on screen she looks like we're back in Wolf, her and Jack Nicholson.
Yes, Wolf is another good one, by the way.
That last shot of her and that last shot of Michelle Pfeiffer in Wolf is probably the best she's ever looked on screen in any given moment.
So unbelievably hot in that movie. It's ridiculous.
Oh my god, it's like that and Lady Hawk.
So I want to ask a question. I'm going to direct this towards you, Jarett, for a quick question here. What are your thoughts about Candy Bliss being gay, and sort of just saying it again? Totally, obviously fine with it, but it's unprompted. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and then they do nothing with it.
Again, that felt like something that was a relic of the book, right? The idea that if they had explored that character in any way, shape, or form, it would make sense, like, so I kind of liked it because I feel, but although I do feel like there's like, we're edgy. There's like a black lesbian in this movie. Or, I mean, what I would actually prefer, frankly, is to find out that in the book, Candy is not a black lesbian, and Whoopi Goldberg said, please make this character a lesbian. I think that would be really interesting. I think
she might have, for all we know. I don't know. I haven't read the book.
I think if I think about it from like a function perspective, it feels like really the only moment of personal connection that Bethy has in the film with a new person. And it does kind of explain why Candy is at, the family's restaurant 15 years later. Like maybe they're actually friends. Right. So it does give you that indication that there's a deeper connection there, but it is very strange. And also just the way it happens is so weird that she like recoils and then has this long explanation about like, I don't want women to think I'm coming on to them. So it's interesting as much as Kenny was just saying, there's not a lot of subtext in that interaction about Candy revealing herself as a lesbian, right? She physically jumps away from a white woman and then tells her she's her whole story.
Yes. It's because I want to have sex with you, but I can't.
Which, by the way, I mean, it's Michelle Pfeiffer. I understand, but
I understand.
I think that what they needed was not so much the fact that she's gay, more the fact that she gave this little speech to Michelle Pfeiffer about how all eyes are on me at all times. Because I have ascended to a level where I'm everybody's boss in here and everybody basically wants me to fail. Or, it's assuming I'm failing when I'm not failing, where like to get to a moment where that mattered moving forward, I think is what any other movie would have done. But not that you have to do it. Like I think it's fine. And frankly, like in 1999, not the guy to say this, but representation matters. And it is better to just normalize this shit anyway.
100.
In terms of just like throwaway shit, like that's a better thing. And to your point, Jarett, it's even cooler if it wasn't in the book. But there is some potential narrative function of her in that position that she alludes to that could have come back in a way that we could have had a victory moment.
Yeah, I mean, I have an issue with the way that it was kind of just. I guess I don't have an issue at all with it, quite frankly. It's more about the fact that it comes back to subtext, right? It comes back to like, did we have to overtly say it? Could it have not just kind of been there in subtext? But I mean, that's not what this movie is. So I mean,
it's for dummies, Phil. You have to remember.
I got to remember it's a movie for dummies.
Dummies like me.
There's another throwaway line that I don't know if you guys caught at one point where they're at the restaurant, I believe, and Vincent picks up the phone. And the dad says something about a bookie operation.
Yeah.
But like, not as a joke.
I'm very into like generalized teenage badness. Like anything that's like some like general mischief a teen can get into, Vincent gets into.
Yeah. To me, I was just like, did I hear that right? Did they just throw away this like generalized criminal behavior?
I was under the impression it was like he was on the phone talking with his friends from back home, and the dad was like, "Oh, don't make sure you're not talking to your bookie." I don't know, like weird.
That's what I thought it was,
jokes.
But it's not a dad joke because Trent says it totally fucking straight, like tisk tisk, none of that bookie shit. I was
but I also wasn't my bookie. It was my graffiti partner.
Yeah, like I don't know that Treat Williams was like maybe giving you the proper levels in that scene.
That might be. That might be. That might be it. Yeah, there might be a dad joke.
Treat Williams was like
joke.
I don't know. Treat Williams. I mean, has he ever felt like the first choice in a film?
No.
Like, have you ever seen a movie and said, "Oh, I'm so glad they got Treat for this"? No, it's like they went down the list of the people they couldn't get and wound up with someone very serviceable.
Yeah,
I'm always into those guys who were like, he's an Everwood guy. He was certainly a TV guy.
He's great.
I'm very into those guys who are like handsome enough to be leading men, but not good enough actors. So they're always playing the guy handsome enough to date or marry the beautiful leading lady.
Yeah.
Like to me, that was like what Dermot Mulroney was, right?
Right. Yes. And by the way, I think
Dylan McDermott is that too, frankly, when he's in movies.
But he's not really in movies.
He's not really in movies, but he
was in Steel Magnolias. It's anyone who's ever.
You're going to go to 1987. You're going to go to 1987.
Well, he's good in 89, buddy. Wedding.
Anybody? No, I'm talking about Dylan now. Anybody who's ever dated or married Julia Roberts in a movie where she wasn't in an obvious two-hander, where it was like her movie, falls into this category.
100%.
I agree with that. So
like Aaron Eckhart's a good one.
No, I mean it's perfect.
Yeah, the best.
So you asked the question earlier, and I agree. I don't know why Whoopi's still hanging out with them. It's never really explained, other than that they don't want her to just resurface later to be like, "I fucked up. I'm a bad cop, and I don't know where your son is." Oh wait, you found him. He's on your front lawn.
But it is weird that in that scene, right, she talks about being the boss. And then in that scene, there's just a white man telling her to calm down because like you're going off crazy. It's like, were there demotions in that time? I don't know. It seemed weird to have her like be answering to someone after that entire setup about everything else.
Yes, I agree on all fronts. The only way that we know there's a passage of time is in the recasting of the kids.
Right. Yeah.
Outside of that, their house, their faces, their clothes, everything stays exactly the same. You would have no idea that a decade had passed.
I will say, there are some very, the first part's 85, right? Like I will say there are some very 1985 clothes on some extras when they're walking into that hotel. There's a woman who walks out of the hotel in black high heels and a full body purple jumpsuit that really just was great. It's great. But otherwise, yes.
Yeah. The 80s thing that is kind of crazy to me is the casual use of shoulder pads in shirts.
Oh yeah.
Like normal women, not fashion forward, we're not talking about Iman here.
That's
just walking around. Yeah. I just watched Summer School and Kirstie Alley is teaching school in a denim shirt with shoulder pads like it's not a big deal.
Okay, I have distinct memories of my mom wearing a t-shirt and being able to see shoulder pads under the t-shirt. They were like built in. This is what you did because you needed bigger shoulders from 1983 to 1987. You had to have the largest shoulders possible.
And why?
It was a law. It was a law. It was a law.
So speaking of the law, for the second, when they find out that they think that they know what house he's in, the FBI and Candy Bliss, the fact that they let Beth go with them is insane. They would never have let Beth charge into a house with a fucking warrant.
But thank God they did, because no one would have put it together. What happened otherwise?
This is also true.
I mean, like put Bethy on the police force. She's wasting her skills in photography. Finds the kid, identifies the culprit in minutes. Like
I completely agree. And then we have the scene where Whoopi just dumps all of the information from a kitchen table and just says, like, so here's what happened. You know, there's no reason to unpack this in any, you know, effective way. I'm just going to barf out all of this exposition because it needs to happen. Yeah. It's, you know, it's what it is. We talked about the dance scene, but
because, I mean, of course you had all the here's the thing for me. Yeah. All that exposition, obviously very, you know, like kind of inelegantly laid out. Mm-hmm. Very important to get the ending that the movie wanted you to get, which was that this guy's a good guy. That dad number 2 is a good guy, and frankly, that's what I really liked about this movie was that it went all the way to the kid coming back, and then gave you another act of the kid acclimating when he had a perfectly enjoyable, happy life somewhere else with a guy who seems like a good dad. That I thought, and I'm sure this is in the book, but to me, that's the interesting kind of moment. That's the interesting kind of moment that the movie gives you. What would have been really great in the miniseries in our minds are the 9 years where this family is trying to figure out how to move forward.
Right.
But again, you can't do that. Every aspect of this movie could have made for a really interesting miniseries that we're going to write.
Yeah, it's going to be great. But I really just, it comes back to sort of what we were saying.
Deep End of the Ocean,
we're going to do Deep End. Yeah, we're going to do a miniseries.
Oh my God, we're crazy. This is the craziest one we've ever tried.
But I do think that, like, that was
Jarett, you wouldn't believe what Phil and I are actively working on.
We'll tell you when we're done recording. It'll be great. We're actively developing 2 things. Yeah. Anyway, but we'll talk about it when we're not recording.
Well, three now.
That's right.
But I do think it comes back to sort of the overwhelming feeling I had watching this was I don't necessarily have a problem with what's happening on screen. It's how it's happening on screen.
Yeah,
like it's just.
I agree.
It's not even that the movie. It's not even that the players are bad. It's just, why are we doing it like this? It's just very strange. So, you know, as we mentioned, they dance at the Italian restaurant. You know, there's conflict. They eventually decide that they're going to let the kid go back to dad number 2 because there's too much conflict in the house. The kid eventually comes back. But there is an interesting argument that transpires between Beth and Pat, where Beth is like, we got to let him go back. He wants to go back to dad number 2. And Treat saying, I'm not losing my son again. That's a good conflict that I don't think they really make as much hay out of as they could have. But again, like, so, you know, that's kind of this movie, which is sort of skirting on the surface of things and not necessarily going as deep as they could have. Yeah, I mean, and then you know, Vincent. Oh, right, Vincent goes to prison. But why is he? What is he arrested for? I forget what he's arrested for.
I kind of do too, like tagging or
was he
something?
Bookieing?
Yeah.
He was. I know he was drunk because he was asked if he was drunk. He may have been something with a car.
Oh, okay,
something car related.
Right.
But they go to the jail. The thing about this, and this is emblematic of the film as a whole, which is that serious shit is happening and it's being played very chill. This kid's in jail. kid is kidnapped. Everything's just very chill. Found new kid who might be old kid. All of it's just played at the same levels. So you're just like, what am I supposed to really be invested in? What am I really supposed to care about? It's not great. Anyway, long story short, Vincent gets out of jail. Sam comes back. Ben comes back, however, whatever you want to call him. He comes back. They play basketball together. It's a great scene. It's actually a really nice, like, considering that it was not the end of that the end of the book is a lot more ambiguous, doesn't really kind of wrap it all up with a bow. This movie kind of finds a way to have its cake and eat it too, in a way that I was kind of surprised worked as well as it did, going into it knowing that there were problems with this production. So, what did you think of the ending, Kenny? Or Jarett, please.
No. I have a question. I want to hear this first.
This is the only ending for the movie.
Right?
Yeah, it's the only ending for the movie. This is not. I saw. Did you guys see what the original ending was?
Maybe not specifically. What was the original ending?
The original ending apparently was that Ben confesses to Bethy that he has suicidal thoughts, which is
I think that's in the book. Right?
That's a rough ending. That's an ending, like, that's not the ending for this movie. The ending for this movie is everybody comes together and does what's best for the kid, including Vincent, and everyone's going to be okay. Because, again, this is not a challenging movie. This movie isn't everything's going to work out okay type movie, to the point where the kid falls on them. The kid is, like, dropped from heaven on them. Yeah. So that, again... Movies for Dummies, as a proud dummy, I'm happy with this ending.
Okay.
What do you got, Jarett?
What were you going to say, Jarett?
We should just be on the ending. We should just be glad it didn't end with them all doing that Italian dance again together, like bringing in Sam's other dad.
Oh my God!
Bringing Brenda Strong back and just going around the block.
But wait, Brenda Strong where is she in this? I saw her credit, but is she in it for like?
She's the friend. She's the best friend. She's the friend in the beginning. She's the best friend in the beginning.
She's
the one who gets on the thing and says, "May I have everyone's attention, please? We're missing her son."
Of course.
I love Brenda Strong. She's like, she's amazing.
He looks really hot in this too.
Yeah.
Like,
well, this was like probably around the time she was on Seinfeld, right? And she was the braless wonder, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is by like this circa that.
Yes. Yeah. It was, and she looked. Yeah. What's her name? I forgot. But she's the one who got married too in the backwards day, right?
I remember.
But
I can't go that deep on Seinfeld.
But she, yes, Michelle was it was very real life that Michelle Pfeiffer being hot. Michelle Pfeiffer only had hot friends.
Of course, 100%. Yeah,
which is all the high school friends were just tens.
Yes,
which is also why Cecile stole her child, because she wasn't part of the hot club growing up.
Correct.
No, and they were making fun of her. They're like, she's in a commercial. What a loser!
She's got black hair. She's gonna, terrible. Okay, here's my question, and this may be very stupid because I don't think they say it in the film. What is the deep end of the ocean?
A very, very good question. One that is not answered in the film.
Not only that.
Yeah. Like, what is that?
Not only that. All right, so when My Name Is Earl was on the tube.
Oh boy. Yeah.
When My Name Is Earl was on the tube, I've talked about this before. In the opening credits of My Name Is Earl, he had his list of stuff, and his list of stuff was always stupid, except there was one thing that clearly they're like, we're going to do this episode, which is cost Dad the election. Oh, interesting. Cost Dad the election. Tell me more about that. They do that in this a little bit. When she's explaining about Ben, she's like, he's a red hat. So what? He's deathly afraid of the water. I'm like, okay, we're going to get to the deep end of the ocean.
Yeah.
What? Okay. Why did they?
That's a good. You paid a lot more attention to this movie than I did.
Well, Kenny. But I don't even. I'm not giving the movie credit for that. Seems like for like half a second, they're like, we should give some specifics. My kid's afraid of the water, but in a movie called The Deep End of the Ocean, I was sure this was foreshadowing, but no, it was not.
I mean, like obviously, there's some sort of like emotional metaphor happening, but I don't even know that I really get what that's supposed to be. Like, is Bethy trapped in the deep end of the ocean? I don't know.
No deep end of the ocean. That's not the way the ocean works, Beth.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's all very. I was waiting for it, but okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I feel better.
No, I certainly didn't get it. I appreciate that Kenny was able to glean something from it.
I mean, listen, he heard the word water and is like, well, that's got to be it. So
that's fair. It is a title though that's perfect for this movie, and by that I mean it's kind of a meaningless title, forgettable, that doesn't really exist. Kind of like perfect. This movie. Let's rate this film, because then I have 2 questions for you, Jarett. I'm going to put you on the spot, but it's going to be great.
I have a question for you too, Jarett.
Oh, great. So 3 questions.
Great. I'm so ready.
Cool. So before this podcast, I didn't see this film in 99. Before this podcast, I was at a 40 for this film, and I'm pretty much at the same. Like, I don't think it's a fucking terrible movie. I don't think it's like, as Kenny texted me, we've done far worse films in 1999. It's not a film I'd recommend to people to watch. It's not a film that I will probably ever think about again until we adapt it, obviously. But...
Then which are often the kinds of films we do adapt. It's always these movies we're like, that's pretty stupid, but we could do a movie.
We could do it. So I'm still there. I'm at like a go ahead. Go ahead.
No, what's amazing is when you guys do adapt this, they're going to pull up this podcast and use it in every interview that you give about your project, talking about the original film.
Because this is the inception point. This is the moment when we decided we were going to do it.
This is your story. This is your story.
It's all on mic and camera. So I'm at a 45, Kenny. Where are you at?
Oh, 45?
Yeah, or 40. 40. Sorry, 40.
I gave it a 70 before this.
Whoa.
I mean, look, I wrote not much to dig into, very surface, but kept my attention, did its job. Not a bad movie. I'm going down, but you know where I'm going to go, Phil?
Where?
Into the 50s.
You're never in the 50s. You hate the 50s.
I'm going to give it a 55.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a 55. It's a 55.
I can handle a 55.
I actually think it's a pretty okay movie. I think it's a pretty dumb movie. I don't really want my name on the pull quote for this, but
except for the poster for the HBO miniseries when we do
that's
it.
right. I don't want
they're doing it.
Developed by Kenny Neibart, cool. Not a bad movie. Kenny Neibart, please don't. But okay, 55. Jarett, what do you got?
What about you, Jarett?
I mean, I definitely saw it when it came out. I remember hating it, but also me at 17 is not the ideal demographic for this film. So I would put it probably in like a 49.
Okay.
A little below Michelle's average, but really gets there solely based on the strength of her performance.
Yeah, I mean, it should be said, you know, early on when we did Story of Us, I really hated Story of Us. I really, and in hindsight, I think I've been too hard on Story of Us. I don't think Story of Us is a good movie, but I think I gave it like a 12. Like, I really gave it the gears. And I think that now, having seen this, I got to say, Story of Us is better than I gave credit to at the time. I'm not changing my score necessarily.
It's not a good movie.
It's not a good movie.
It's a very bad movie.
It's a bad movie. Yeah.
It's a very bad movie because the other thing about this movie is, like, I actually kind of think this movie takes place on Earth. Where Story of Us takes place on some other planet where you like flirt with people in your office by like putting on funny costumes.
Right.
You know, it's like, look, I'm crazy scissor nose. Fall in love with me. All right.
What are the
questions, Phil?
Wait, well, hold on. I just want to piggyback on that very, very, very briefly because I know you have somewhere to go. Yeah. But on the Story of Us component, Kenny, I do agree with you that, like, look, what is this?
I'm from Star Trek.
Oh my God. I'll just say
love me?
I'll just say this. Story of Us doesn't take place on Earth. The crazy monologue that Michelle Pfeiffer gives at the end of Story of Us is so insane. At least she is a human in this movie from credits to credits, and I commend her for that. Okay, so my 2 questions for you are Michelle Pfeiffer oriented questions.
Upper half only.
2 very, very quick but on the spot Michelle Pfeiffer questions for you. The first, what is your favorite Michelle Pfeiffer performance? What is your favorite Michelle Pfeiffer movie?
Okay. My favorite Michelle Pfeiffer movie.
Yes.
And when I say Michelle Pfeiffer movie, I mean like the film is a Michelle Pfeiffer film.
Yes.
Up close and personal.
You're the coolest. This is why
we're so happy to have you on.
You're the coolest person I know. I saw that movie in the theater and thought it was like the greatest thing ever, and I can't believe that like the world doesn't think that's a good movie. I don't get it.
Serious?
It's like
Kenny,
I remember
it's so good.
I remember every beat of that film.
It's so good. First of all,
and it has the good Celine Dion movie song too.
Thank you. And it's got Robert Redford. He's amazing. Stockard Channing,
so good.
incredible.
I've never seen it. I need to watch it. Clearly.
Then I won't give away the ending.
Don't ruin it. Yeah,
I'll watch powerful.
It for sure.
It is. I
remember her name. It was Tally Atwater. No, I am right there with you.
I love you, Candy. So that's my favorite Michelle Pfeiffer movie because it's really a film that's built on her. Right.
If someone had put a gun to my head, that would not have been the movie I would thought you were going to say. So there you go.
That's on you.
You would, Phil. I think you'd like it. I'm
sure I would. I'm going to watch it tomorrow.
I think you'd like it in a remember it was made in 1997 type way. But I think you really would like it.
Okay.
Great. And after you watch it, there's a crazy backstory that I'll tell you about.
Great.
So my favorite performance is a tie between. Obviously, Batman Returns, because how can you not love that? But also Married to the Mob, I think is probably one of Michelle Pfeiffer's best performances. It's so odd and it's so unlike anything she's ever done. The scene where she screams, "We're getting a divorce!" It's so like this crazy character that she's so good at embodying, and it's weird physical comedy. And Matthew Modine is great, and Mercedes Ruehl is unbelievable.
Dean Stockwell. Yeah.
Oh my God. So good. So yeah, Married to the Mob's probably my favorite non-Catwoman Michelle Pfeiffer performance.
And I would say too, I rewatched it relatively recently as well. And I wish she did more stuff like that.
Oh, because I wish she would
podcast. Like she just took the swing. Too. She went fully into it and she's so good. But yeah.
I will say there's a lot of that sensibility in One Fine Day that gets obviously damped down by the big budget rom-com of it all. Mm-hmm. But like Melanie Parker does have weird foibles that are very, very elevated, and not in the exact same way because I don't really think it's the on par film, but elements of that. But she almost never does comedy, which is a downer because she's really, really good at it.
Well, that's why I thought French Exit was so great, which is that she was doing something very darkly comedic, and she really kind of locked into it. But
she should have gotten half of the roles Holly Hunter got. It's nothing against Holly Hunter, of course, national treasure, but it just felt like Holly Hunter's career is really interesting role after really interesting role after really interesting role, and a lot of them could have been done by Michelle Pfeiffer.
I would agree.
So I honestly can't thank you enough for coming on here to talk about.
Oh my God! I would do this alone in my apartment to myself. At least this way, I don't look insane talking about Deep Into the Ocean for an hour and a half alone.
we truly appreciate it. We love talking with you about obviously anything. So we can't wait to have you back in the future.
Yes. All right. Please, can we get the quality of the film on the
100%. The quality will be on the upswing.
We'll get you on the 89 pod.
Yeah, we'll get you on the 89.
Nothing but quality on there.
It's on the Patreon.
Okay.
So thank you so much for being on here.
Podcast like it. You want the podcast like it. 1999.